I'm sure that everybody here grew up on farms and has a pure taste of food and knows their cheeses because you made them and can milk a cow. I'm sure you slaughtered pigs. You know the taste of grass and fresh herbs that you pick from your massive back garden. Or maybe you're like me and you grew up eating awful food. And maybe you're not like me and didn't have the fortune of moving to England when English food, Nigella Lawson at that moment was writing Nothing, was really, really, really bad. I can remember the day I got a Marshall Scholarship. I got an academic scholarship to go to England. I was a Shakespearean. That was my trajectory. And on our first day, we're in this big old hotel, and these lovely women, they're kind of grandmas with their hairs in a bun. And they were serving, there was kind of a lamb thing, but it was hard to know what it was. And it was covered with this mint jelly because everything had mint jelly then. And they were so proud of their vegetables, which they would heap on the plate. I mean, some more, heap some more. I've tried to, I've imagined, I mean, it's like an anteater that suddenly just like regurgitated its meat. It was just awful, awful, awful stuff. But in the course of time there, English cooking was kind of starting to get better, and largely in homes and where people were good cooks. And I got excited about food and longed one day to work in a restaurant so I could have I wanted a chef's knowledge of being able to go to a market and think, yes, I can do this, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this. Instead of thinking, I'll have to take this home and then read a recipe about it and figure out how to do it. So I come into food very accidentally. I'm sure I'm the only one here who has done that. And I thought a good way of describing my accidents might be a way of three people. And like the first times I met them. One is the Italian butcher, Dario Cecchini, whom I had the great privilege to work with and whom I met before I even asked to work for him quite a few years ago, 20 years ago, 21 years ago. And my then not yet wife and I wandered into his butcher shop, and there were three people. And he was standing on the counter, three women, and he was reciting Dante's Inferno at full blast. And it was half closed. I mean, it was open closed. There was no business. It was just reciting. And this went on for a long time. And when finally he stopped, I asked for a bistecca because this is his famous meat. And he said, "Oh, no. You can't have a bistecca. You have to order it in advance. And you can't, no, absolutely not." And so we were rejected and carried on our way. The next person is a guy who goes by the name of Bob, and this is in Lyon, in France. And Bob is a baker. His name is not Bob. His name is Yves, but he goes by Bob. Who knows why, but he goes by Bob. And a Sunday at Bob's in Lyon, this tiny little boulangerie, and the line, you've just never seen anything like this. Every Sunday, there's a line that goes, like it's from this door all the way to that door, and then sometimes it goes beyond that. And they're all trying to get into the place, and they want to get their hot bread. And Bob is playing salsa music, and it's really loud, and money is changing hands because it's all cash, and it's getting crowded, and the door is it's got a bell on it, and it's going bing, 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 bing the whole time until finally you get there and you get your bread and you get more than you want to, because by then you're really, really hungry, and you kind of come tottering out and just smelling this fantastic, just hot, just baked, delicious bread, and can't wait till you get home so you start eating it right there. And the third thing was an editorial meeting at the New Yorker, where I was lucky enough to I was the fiction editor, And you would have these meetings every now and then when you'd come and you propose an idea. And my idea was, well, I had just made the mistake of inviting Mario Batali over for dinner, and it was a disaster, just catastrophic. Number of lessons in it, which is like, if you have people over for dinner, don't make that the time you make the dish for the first time. Well, I made 3 dishes for the first time, and Mario ended up cooking all of them. And then, being Mario, and left at 5 in the morning, and bringing lots of guests with him. And I went to this editorial meeting and said, this guy's crazy. He's wacko. And somebody should write a profile of him. And I thought of Jay McInerney. It was actually Jay McInerney's birthday that I was hosting. The writer, fiction writer. And Remnick, the editor, took me aside and said, actually, maybe you should do it. And I thought, well, I don't know if I want to do it, but I think the only reason he thought of that is because, unlike Britain, New Yorkers don't cook many meals at home for very good reasons, often because their kitchens are too small and the dining rooms are too small, and you've got very good restaurants, and the restaurants in England were awful. I have a feeling at that moment I was perhaps the only person he knew who invited people around for dinner. So I was kind of some kind of elevated cook in his eyes, and I thought, well, I don't want to write a profile of a celebrity chef, but I do want to get into a kitchen. And if I can do this as a way of getting into a kitchen, then it like satisfies this wish I had for years. And that was how that was the whole reason I did the piece in the first place. And then the piece did well, and then I went back and started a book, and the book then led me to Dario, and I started to learn the excitement of it's an excitement. I'm jumping ahead, but that's fine. It's an excitement I felt when I went to. In the end, I ended up having to go to cooking school in Lyon, and I went to the Institut Paul Bocuse, and there was one fish course I took, which was famously brutal. And it started at 8 and it finished at 7, but that was day 1. The next day it started at 7, and then it finished at 8. The next day it started at 6, and then it finished at 9. And the object was to learn in 1 week all the fish of the sea and shellfish and all the French ways to make them. I mean, it's a massively brutal, encyclopedic, but really exciting thing. I thought it costs more money than most because you get all this fish, but I thought, I know people in New York who pay thousands of dollars to come and have, like, in 1 week, learn everything about fish. But maybe not. But that's what I wanted. And that got me excited. And I have written other things. I do have a book about New York that's coming together from when I first came here, and the place seemed like a Martian. It seemed like Mars, and I was maybe the Martian. Or maybe it seemed like Mars, and I was not the Martian. And I did write a book about soccer hooligans when I was living in England. But food has become my preoccupation and sort of my obsession. I have 2 illustrations of, well, by way of this, and I'm going to just make sure I'm monitoring my time. Jumping ahead in some ways, but I think what I ended up learning from food is, well, one, a premise, which is that food is important and is essential to us as water, air, sleep. I mean, it's fundamental. No food, you die. No water, you die. No air, you die. But unlike all the other things we need to live, food, as we eat it as human beings, is mainly made. It's cooked. And we all need food, but you have to really learn how to get it or make it. And this makes it already a complex thing. This actually makes it culture. It becomes an expression of our humanness. And in that is a kind of why food became so exciting for me, because in food I would find, sure, you'd find taste, you'd find the intensity of a local ingredient, which is an amazing thing. I was just thinking about it now because I was eating these really, I don't know how to say it, sucky, damp, mushy cherries from Union Square Market. And I've been ruined for cherries because there are cherries you get in the Rhone Valley, which are like the most magnificent cherries you've ever had in your life. And once I had them, there was nothing. I started buying them by the crate. There was everything I wanted to do with cherries. I made cherry sauce for duck. I made cherry jam. I made a cherry jus that I then brought back. I concentrated it and brought them back in these frozen little bottles. I still have one in my freezer. It's diluted now by sort of the sucky cherries, but it's still, they're still basically there. I went off on a digression. Come back. But also food is, it's grandmothers, it's history, it's the environment, it's politics, it becomes, in some way, if you really address all that food can be, it can become everything that's going on. Politics, labor, the seasons, climate warming, and it's all there. And to really get into your food and to understand your food is to somehow, for me, engage with being a member of the earth in ways that were just enriching and startling and always surprising for me. I wanted to offer two illustrations of like two food fanatics and what they did with them. And one is, one's probably Bob. Bob, best bread any of us has ever eaten. And he took me on when no one, we changed our lives. We moved to Lyon where I was going to learn to be a French trained chef. And partly we moved to Lyon because one of the things I learned at the butcher shop is that the Italians invented French cooking. And the French didn't know this yet, but the Italians believe it very, very firmly. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to, and they think, Lyon was probably the place where it kind of was the portal that came through. So I thought, well, I'm going to follow the track of Katrina de Medici and I'm going to learn what she taught them. And that didn't get a warm reception in Lyon. But I do believe categorically that it's true, and even more so now than ever. But we went there. We had three-year-old twin toddlers. We had an apartment in New York. We had jobs. We had a living, and we just moved to Lyon. We did it properly. We had visas. We had a lease. We had a bank account. I had some introductions, and then I couldn't get a kitchen to take me. I just one place. It was in trouble. One place, the chef got sick, and after that, they just thought, Italian cooking. No, I don't think so. And it was getting a little desperate. And this was a big project. We'd moved to this place, and I was going to write a book, obviously. And then I know what I'll do. I'll rush down, and I'll say, I'll work for Bob. And I ran down the staircase. I knocked on the door. He was just closing up. I said, Bob, because he knew, because we were visiting, and he was right across the street from us. So I said, Bob, I'm going to work for you, and that's what I'm going to do for my book. And he said, nah. What do you mean? Nah. No, he knew that, I've been rejected there, and he said, nah. He knew I was the kind of the last chance after the last chance of the last chance. And then I said, but Bob, but then I was pretty desperate. Everyone recognizes you make the best bread in Lyon. You might make the best bread in France. And I want to find out why. And I hit a nerve, which I'm taking me longer and longer to understand, which is basically Bob, for various reasons, was deeply insecure. And in a city of fanatical gastronomic extremists, he was just a guy who made bread. But he knew that his bread was different. He knew no one knew how or why his bread was different. And he kind of embraced that idea. He got used to it. He said, okay, you come, you work here. And like the first thing he said was, you live right across the street, don't you? I said, yeah. And he said, well, if you ever can't sleep, 3 a.m, something like that, just pop over. Man, if it's 3 a.m, if I can't sleep, I don't go out for walks. But I could see what he was doing. He was extending friendship. And in the end, he introduced me to Lyon. He introduced me to his bakery. He told me his secret. Took a while to get there, but it wasn't actually such a thing. His secret is it's all in the flour, all of it in the flour. He introduced me to societies. He introduced me to other restaurateurs. He made us home in Lyon. And then I did this thing. I quit to go to the Institut Paul Bocuse to learn my French cooking. And he was so shocked that I would quit. I said, "No, Bob, I'll be back. I've got to do this because this is one of the things. This is a check." And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh, and I'll come back soon." And I did try to come back. I just tried to work on the weekends, but it was impossible. It was just too exhausting. But then he got all excited by the fact that I was going to go to Bocuse and make him a grand meal. And he got very, very, and he kind of did a little song about, "You're going to make me a grand meal. You're going to make me a grand meal. You're going to make me a grand meal." And really what he was announcing that he's my friend. And there's a Lyonnais thing, which took me 2 years to understand, which is that in Lyon, you're not someone's friend until they invite you into their home and you make them food. The city is gastronomic extremism, and this is just the deal. When you're invited into your home, you share your wares, you make food, you give them your good wine, you form a bond that lasts a very, very long time. And we have Lyonnais friends now who, if we go to Europe and we don't go to Lyon and we don't go to their house for dinner, then they're like, "Well, yeah, what? You're not friends anymore?" And that's really what Bob was asking. And anyways, so there's Bob. And then there's Dario. I'm going to be quick. Oh, I've got at least 3 or 4 more minutes. Yeah, all right, I can go see it. So the thing about Dario is, actually, the thing about being a journalist, all right, I'm a journalist it's not like I'm doing a stage. I am doing a stage. I'm doing these places. I'm doing my work. But I'm also a journalist. So I take the liberty to ask my employer any question I want to ask. And they answer it because they know that I'm writing about them. And it's the kind of creepy thing about a journalist is that if you talk to your subject, Janet Malcolm wrote about this. So basically said, whatever you do, don't trust a journalist. If you spend hours with someone and like you're really interested in them and like what they, how they think and sort of what their values are and why they did that and why they did this, and then the next day you come ask them some more questions. The next day you ask them more questions, and I've been thinking that, and I'd love to ask more questions. You get this relationship, which is, you get kind of privy to someone's soul, and it's. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that to you. And so I just wanted to read this one thing because it's kind of at the heart of it. I forgot I was looking at this again. So I was talking to Dario and I said, "Dario, what happens to your butcher shop if you die?" Which is a little blunt, I admit. Then I mentioned, what's the business if you're not there? Is it a business if you're not there? And is that really a business? Yes, it's a business, but if you don't show up and we don't get to see Dario, then is that really going to work? And he exploded. And I forgot how much he exploded. I just looked at this and says, "What are you talking about? I don't have a good business. I have a bad business." He uses business, the American, in English. "I'm not interested in good business. I do not want to be Mario Batali." said, punching the B in Batali like an airbag. I'm repelled by marketing. I am artisan. I work with my hands. My model is the Renaissance, the Bodego, the artist workshop, Giotto, Raphael, Michelangelo. These are my inspirations. Do you think they were interested in business? So, here's two guys, both artists in their ways, both really deep souls. Bob is like, I don't know anyone who feels like he's like it's his flock. He makes bread for his flock. But it was my wife who observed this, is Daria was actually really upset by this exchange. And she thinks, I wouldn't say this, but she thinks, and she's quite confident about it, that he started changing his operation. He changed an operation so that it could run without his being there. And I emailed Kim, his wife, last night. I said, so what's Dario now? And she kind of understated it, but she said, well, there's the butcher shop. Well, the butcher shop now is full to capacity. And then there's a proper butcher shop, which is down the road, which is even bigger. And then there's another one, which is now doing shipping. And he's also bought another butcher shop just outside of Florence. 2 restaurants, and 2 restaurants, and a food truck, and employing about 55 people. And then there's a restaurant now in the Bahamas and one in Dubai, maybe 200 people altogether. And then there's a new one, in Macello in Bulgaria, which is a really exciting one. It's in a partnership with another chef, which has about 12 employees. And then there's others, there's this and this. Business. Dario's close friend said, what's he doing? Is he Prada or something like that? Bob didn't quite, I was having trouble making it to a business, but I should say, just a digression, because I did this film, which we were talking about that for various reasons got lost, but I'm remembering that it was 2 parts. It was an hour for the BBC. 1 hour was doing fancy food, 1 hour was doing, killing pigs and making bread. But the second part, Bob knew that he was in it, and he rented out what's called the English pub in Lyon, which is where I'll watch all the sporting events. And he invited everyone there, and he put it up because you put it on the big screens, and everybody can watch the show as it's being transmitted live, or as it's being transmitted. And I said, Bob, you want to see it first, because you say a lot of bad words and you burn stuff, and maybe you want to see it before. No, I trust you. I don't know if I would trust me. I don't know what. But in the event, it was pretty embarrassing, but it was also good, and it got him. And and he was so enlarged. It was like someone finally gets him. And there was a moment where a baguette is cracked, and it's cracked in my ear, and it just reverberates. Of course, that's just the acoustics of the editors, but it's still like that's what good bread should be, is that crack. I am going to wrap this up, but I'm going to wrap it up by noting that Bob did take us out. I took Bob out to dinner. We didn't have him over for dinner. He told us his whole family story. He told us about his brother Philippe, who's the great, great baker, who's the one who taught him how to bake. About his father, who was a baker, and taught the whole family how to bake. About his mother, about the fact that his father wouldn't speak to his mother. And it just went on. And his Cuban wife, and how he went to Cuba, and how he was a socialist, and he's still waiting for the revolution. And then we dropped him off, and he pretended to go back to the boulangerie, but in fact, he went to our local bar. And then the next week, his father died. And then the next week, his brother Philippe had an aneurysm, and he died. And then Bob, mourning, just wailing one night, some kid threw a rock through his window of his boulangerie, and he went chasing after the kid, and then tripped and broke his leg, and then couldn't be a baker for 6 weeks. And finally he was coming back, and we're all happy when he had an aneurysm and died. That's a sort of sorry dark tale to end this on. But it's just, for me, there are two stories of I think something that all of us face, which is how to make a business out of a precious thing, which is food, and how not to ruin it as food was ruined but for most of us growing up. And it's tricky, but you want to make it into a business. You don't want to be the only guy who's there. And that for me was just these two lovely, deeply meaningful people. Kind of brought the home the delicacy of what we're doing.
Bill Buford.